I think this is where, like Nisargadatta is fantastic, absolutely.
Yes.
But there's a difference between Advaita Vedanta and tantric perspectives on life.
Mm-hmm.
And I think for part of the journey that people go through, you've got to go from Advaita Vedanta into Tantra, because they both complement and complete one another. So Advaita Vedanta will take you down the pathway of negation, right? Of negating yourself as being anything that is, until finally you reach this place of I'm not anything that appears, all that sort of stuff. And that's kind of the finishing point, is the nothingness and the emptiness, right? If nothing is what you're searching for, nothing is what you will find. Now, where the tantric pointers take you to is the realization that you're not nothing that appears. You are everything that appears, and it just like Advaita Vedanta will give you an experience of nothingness.
Yeah.
Right. Tantra. I'm not talking about the misperceived notion of Tantra relating to sex and all that sort of stuff, which is where it's kind of getting sold in the Western market. But it's actually the tantric teachings from like Kashmir Shivism, for example, where it will point to the notion that you are everything that appears, and that there is nothing that you can, in fact, claim not to be. And then you'll come to see that it's actually quite nonsensical to say that there is nothing that is what you are. You can't have something in existence which is not you, because that means you're basically saying that there is another. There is something separate to you that is not you. So in order to deal with that sort of, I guess, mental conundrum with that, they deny the existence of it. Well, it doesn't actually exist. It's just an illusion, right? Like that bottle there. This bottle doesn't actually exist. It's just an illusion. So that's why I can say I'm not the bottle, because it's just an illusion. It doesn't exist. I'm not this, right? Whereas the reality is it does exist. You can feel it. You can touch it. You can see it. You can hold things, and there's a realization that it is you, because it can't be anything other than you. You know, if you are the ground of all being, if you are the ocean, then there can be nothing that arises out of that is not what you are, right? So there's Advaita Vedanta it serves its purpose with regards to a disentanglement from, or a de-identification of, solely being the body or the thoughts or the emotions, whatever. So that serves its purpose to give you a bit of wiggle room and breathing space, right? But then what happens is that it kind of reverses itself, and then you recognize, wait a minute, I am everything that is here. But it's a seeing and a realization and a recognition that's not one that is sticky.
Yes.
It's not a sticky thing. It doesn't become, you don't get locked in. It's something that's able to freely exist.
More transparent, passes through.
It just comes and goes, and it just flows and all the rest of it. And it's not something that needs to be defended or held on to or anything like that. So for part of my, I guess, journey with this is this is where it's really good to draw from your own well, as I've mentioned in the past.
I love that.
and recognize that there are a lot of people around who might be communicating a particular thing, but to know that whatever you communicate to yourself is higher than what someone else can communicate to you, you know, and that's been my experience, and You know, it was a scary place at the start when you first start going down this place, is to trust yourself,
Yes.
because ultimately there is no one else that exists to trust, right? There isn't. There's only ever you,
Yeah.
anyway, and you will teach yourself by bringing yourself across individuals or people that might communicate something to you that you will see through eventually as having some sort of flaw to it or some sort of erroneous little pointer in there. And that there then becomes your way of teaching yourself how to see through stuff that's not pointing or leading you to greater freedom and independence of yourself. Because ultimately what you want is to be, recognizing that you are completely free, self-illuminating, self-guiding. You have no needs for anybody or anything like that, even though needs may arise as feelings, but ultimately you are free of all of that. And that's a good place to be, where you feel just whole, complete, lacking nothing. You can't add any more to, or you can't take away from. These sorts of things is it's a good and comfortable place to be. It's a blissful place, I suppose, would be the word that they'd use. And even the whole notion as we bring death into this, death, what we call death, all of that becomes something that really doesn't matter, because ultimately, you've done it billions of times before.
It's like
and I'm not talking about
right.
I'm not talking about reincarnation there. I'm just talking about that's the reality of it.
Yes.
And as you begin to identify with the absoluteness of what you are, it becomes more apparent that that's what you are, and the courage to be what you are naturally arises within that, because the little frail sort of chick in the egg can't identify as being a chicken while it's still in the egg. You know what I mean? It's kind of got to come out of the egg,
yes,
to be able to see that it's a chicken.
Yeah.
And it can look back on the egg and say, "Oh yeah, I was never that." But it can't actually speed up the growth of the chick in the egg. It's just got to do its own thing. And
what
this
was
is
wrong with you when you were dead like 100 years ago, like whatever, 200 years ago, when you like 100 deaths ago?
Exactly. But I've been thinking about physics lately, and in physics, there's a massive gap between physics and what's known today. In physics, for example, with the notion of time, right? Physics no longer see time as being linear, or a straight line thing of past, present, future, and you travel left to right like this. You go on a straight line through it. What they now see is that the past influences the future, and the future influences the past. They both influence each other, right? So I'm looking at that from the perspective of an application, a self-application. If that's a truth that they're discovering, that the future influences the past, right? Just like the past influences the future, apparently, right? Then what you are now, right, has applied influence on what you were, to cause the what you were aspect of you to experience certain things, which led to certain decisions to cause you to be what you are now. So you're actually creating yourself through a series of experiences. And that's why when you turn around and look back on the I guess the comet trail of what you are, it all kind of comes together and makes some sort of sense. Well, if that didn't happen, then I wouldn't be this sort of thing, right? But how about the notion of you here today caused that to happen just simply by your present existence, drew that into being. And that's me just playing around, I guess, with this notion of physics where it looks at time basically influencing each other in both directions. That's how they look at it nowadays, or they're looking at it with slices, right? As far as this reality is concerned, right? But the actuality is that time is just a concept. You know, it doesn't actually exist.
You know, I love what you said. It just, yeah, it's like I was just reading a bit of U.G. Krishnamurti today, just a sentence, and he said, he says, I can sit in this room for days, for years, and if I go to town, it will be just like, he goes, there's no town unless I go there. Like, there's no, I could just sit here. It doesn't matter. I'm always here, you know? And for me, it means nothing to go to town, that I need to go somewhere. That's what you said before you touched base on that. It's really excellent point. And you said there is no time, because you know, whether you walk, you said walking happens, whether you're sitting in the room for days, where is time, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
Are bored, you know, people get bored and frustrated, but you can't, there's no time, timeless.
Yeah. And they get bored because they're caught up in this thing called time, the notion of wasting time. That it's actually a waste to just sit still, just to be sitting in your own presence and experiencing the stillness. That becomes a waste of time because something needs to be happening, but something already is happening. It doesn't need to happen. No, there is no purpose. We don't need purpose. We're so beyond the needing of purpose. Like I was talking to one of my clients once, and he'd come back to the facility I manage, I think for the fourth time, and he'd said, I said, so what are you going to be doing different this time around? And he says, well, this time around I'm going to work really hard on finding a purpose. And I said, okay, so what happens if you don't find one? And he goes, oh, well, I don't know. I says, well, I don't know what I'm going to do. And I says, well, have you maybe thought that maybe purpose is overrated? And
so what's the purpose, Craig?
You don't actually need a purpose.
Not having a purpose.
It's okay to be purposeless. You know,
you said it purposefully.
Yeah, you don't have to be purposeful. You can be a porpoise. That's like a dolphin, right? you can be purposeless and to realize that you already are. But it's a journey that people go on to free themselves from that, and to get to that.
But doesn't it seem scary for believed in separate person? Oh, I don't want to disappear. There will be a void, you know. You want to hold on to something, and then when there's that natural letting go that you've got nothing to do with. And then you rest in that which you already are, isn't it? It just you know, you don't go anywhere.
It's the concepts that drop off, because separation, individuality, they're all just so much imagination anyway. It's not actually real, because if it was real, it wouldn't be able to drop away. Right? If individuality was, you know, the final destination of what you are, then the notion of individuality wouldn't be so fragile or able to be challenged. It would last, but it doesn't. It drops away. And I can recall as the I guess the onion peels from yourself. At different times, there is a fear aspect associated with that, and that fear is kind of communicating to you that you're going in the right direction. If you're experiencing fear as a result of something that you might be hearing or thinking, that's pointing to something in you. It's actually taking, run into that as much as you can until finally that which fears is no more, because you come to see that all that is you, free, and you always have been. But I can definitely recall, terror when the belief structure that I had fell away, because when your belief structure falls away, the world that you knew is destroyed. It just vanishes. And that's where they talk about, I guess in Hinduism and another teaching, they talk about the third eye, up on the forehead here.
Yeah.
When the third eye opens, the world is destroyed. And that doesn't literally mean, the planet's going to blow up or anything like that. It just means that what you took to be the world no longer exists. Yeah. It's just gone.
Imagination in here. Yeah.
And then all there is you. It's a realization that
Sorry.
No, Gesundheit.
It's very cool.
It wasn't quite a sneeze though, it was a bit of a cough.
I'll try better next time.
Yeah. I love sneezing. I enjoy a good sneeze in the morning. I might sneeze 3 or 4 times. It's great.
It's sneezing season.
Yeah. So the third eye opening. All these things. I think that's a good thing. When the world just gets destroyed, then you realise that there never was a world anyway. Yeah. That was all just part of the illusion of separation. It was all just you. And this is the thing where the tantric pointers take you, is the recognition and the actual experiential recognition that all that is you. There is nothing other than you. There is nothing that you can claim not to be in all honesty. How can you say you're not something that appears? Anything that is can't exist unless it's in you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
exactly.
So everything arises.
Everything in the space is somehow like this notion that there's all you in a space. Because if you breathe the same air, isn't it one air, like one space? Space appears when
but space. But space doesn't actually exist.
Yeah.
So even now, like you're in that apparent room there, right?
Yeah.
And you've got an apparent distance between one wall and the other wall, the chair and the table, and between you and the computer that you're looking at, there's this stuff, right? But if you move your hand through it, you'll experience resistance because you're moving against something.
Yeah.
And what you're moving against is a more subtle form of energy. Because the body is a gross form of energy. The computer in front of you is a similar form of energy, right? Appearing, vibrating. And between it, there's this apparent space. So if you move your hand through it, you can feel it. So the notion of space is just a concept. And when you go out off the planet to the darkness, what they call dark space, even that also has a more subtle form of energy about it again, because if black holes collide, it causes a ripple, like you're throwing a stone into a pond. Space will seem to ripple, affecting time and space and all the rest of it. So it's just different sort of weights, I guess, of energetic appearances and expression vibrating at different frequencies. And these are all happening within you as that which watches it. So if you want to, embrace yourself, you can hug a tree, or that's something I said when I was down on the beach the other day about dealing with the racing thoughts in your mind, is to look at a part of yourself which is less transient than something else, like a rock, and focus in on the rock, and it will still it'll still the mind. You can use parts of you to balance out other energetic parts of you that might be sort of a bit more turbulent, like the mind or the thoughts.
Yeah.
Can be slowed down just by looking at the wind moving the leaves of a tree, which is just focusing on a different part of yourself. But we reinforce the narrative of separation by saying that by looking at that tree, you're looking at something outside of yourself and you're focusing in on that, but you're not actually, you're just focusing on another part of yourself, being the tree with the wind moving in the leaves. So you're just taking your focus of attention off of the turbulent thought processes in your mind to focus on something else that's not so vibratory, not so turbulent. You're focusing on this, or you're listening to a bird chirping to pluck at that sort of that thought that's causing problems. So you use yourself in every appearance as a tool to bring, I guess, equilibrium to yourself.
You know, before I came across this non-duality stuff, I read somewhere they were saying watch your thoughts to try and kind of calm them down a bit.
Yeah.
To be honest, it caused more anxiety at the time. But when I investigated at the later stage where the thoughts were coming from, if there was someone thinking the thoughts, I couldn't find anyone.
Yeah.
That kind of that. No one knows how this stuff works, but it seemed to me like an object when I was there was someone here watching the thoughts. That this is where people go wrong direction, I'd say. In this, they just it's more like now it's like a spiritual ego looking for something, knowing something. I know this. I'm a witness of my thoughts, and they really believe there's someone here witnessing the thoughts as a person. But then when you come back to where the thoughts are arising from, you really can't find a person. You can't find a separate entity watching the thoughts because it's all one. As you said, there's nothing separate.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
So it's just thoughts happening with an awareness, watching that happening.
Yeah.
But so much of the stuff. But with the language that we speak sometimes, where we use words of ownership on something, these are my thoughts, this is my feelings, this is my emotions, all that sort of stuff, when really the use of the word my infers an owner.
Yes.
Someone who can own that. And and this is the beauty of what I was talking about with the realization that you're everything. Right, because on an individualistic level, you can't say my thoughts, my this, or I am the thoughts, or I am this, because you stick. Yes. It becomes an identification as being all that you are. But on the level of I guess with the using tantric pointers and you're being everything type of thing, there's a capacity to have a realization that these things are arising within you, and it's okay for them to be there because they can't actually be anywhere else. And if there is a thought arising, different types of questions can be asked. Now, rather than a desire to get rid of the thoughts or to control the thoughts or anything like that, a thought might arise and a question can be asked. Well, this is interesting. What have you come to tell me? Why have you come? Right? And you can allow it to have its existence and parade itself across in front of you, and to arrive at a place where it doesn't matter what appears before you. It actually doesn't really matter that it's there at all, because it doesn't take away from what you are or anything like that. There's no need for it to be challenged or anything like that. And we do thought experiments with clients occasionally, where we'll get them to, in their mind, imagine a rabbit sitting in their mind, like get an image of a rabbit sitting in their mind, and we'll say to them, hold on to that image of a rabbit in your mind. And we'll say, have you got the image? And they'll say, yeah, we've got the image.
Yeah.
Okay, so hold on to it for 30 seconds.
Yeah.
And then afterwards, we'll talk about what that was like for you, holding on to that image of that rabbit for 30 seconds. And all of them will say, pretty much without fault, will say that as I was holding on to the rabbit, it was trying to get away. And that I had to actually apply some effort to try and keep it in my mind, to hold the image of it in existence, because it just wanted to keep running away, right? And I'll say, okay, now let's do the reverse. Have the rabbit on the outside of a fence, and I want you to see the area where the rabbit once was. I want you to keep that empty, so the rabbit's not there anymore. Keep it on the outside. And for 30 seconds, you'll do that. And then at the end, we talk about it. So how was that? And I said, well, I found I had to put a lot of effort into trying to keep the rabbit out, because the image of it wanted to come back in. And then the more energy I put into keeping it out, it grew stronger. And it became harder and harder for me to keep it out. Yeah. Just like it got harder and harder for me to keep hold of it, right?
Yeah.
So I said, well, the solution to this then, and then what you can see is you can't actually keep hold of something because it will pass. So you can't actually keep hold of happiness, because the more you try and keep hold of it, it's going to slip through your fingers, and you'll find yourself just trying to keep hold of it.
Yeah.
And so with, say, the rabbit on the outside is the things that you don't want in your life, like sadness or depression or anything. The more you try and keep it out, the stronger it gets and the more it wants to come in. And so you're putting all this effort into keeping it out. So what do you do?
You lock it in. Yeah.
Yeah. So what you do is nothing.
Mm.
You don't seek to hold, and you don't seek to resist.
Yes.
You just allow what is to be.
Yes.
So because the rabbit's natural course is just to walk across in front of you.
Mm.
Whether it's a rabbit with horns and big buck teeth, or it's a nice fluffy soft one that you want to cuddle. The natural life of a thought is to be born, to live, and then die. As much as you try and keep something alive, it will die. And as much as you try and stop something from existing,
like the more you try to stop them, and where's your mind? Where are your thoughts? But what you say is just letting it be the way it is for no one. Like
it's just this what it is. It's
allowing.
Like this bottle here. If it had sand in it, the water would all be sandy, right? Yeah. And the way I would get clear water would be just to leave it, and it will just separate itself.
Yeah.
So everything, and it's like with the mind, the so-called mind. If you just do nothing with it, you just leave it alone. You don't seek to interfere. Yeah. You just let it do its thing, and eventually it finds its own equilibrium. And everything that appears, it will be like a parade, a procession in front of you. And different questions can start being asked when there's no desire to keep hold of or no desire to resist. You can start asking questions of, hello, my friend, and what have you come to teach me? And they'll say, well, I'm experiencing this sensation when this is here, right? So then that's something then that you can start looking at and saying, okay, what's going on here? What's this pointing at? So it becomes you, in the end, performing psychic surgery on yourself, if you like, to free yourself from these things which appear, until finally it doesn't matter what's in front of you, because every one of them have a right to exist. They have the freedom to be, whether it's a hurricane or whether it's a rainstorm of cotton wool balls or fairy floss falling from the sky. It's everything is allowed to be. Everything, there's nothing that's not you. It's all okay. And this is where some people might call this embracing the shadow, if you like, or seeing parts of you that you don't want to see and you kind of put it away. And with the anxiety stuff and things like that, it passes eventually. But it's a terror. We're all on different trips, we're all having a different experience of coming to our self.
Yes. Yeah.
As far as the wave,
Yeah.
all waves are going to have to go back to the ocean. Every appearance will not be here. Like you, me, we're not going to be here in 40 years. As far as individuals, we're going to be gone as far as this individualistic expression is concerned. And in that process of time, we've got the wonderful sort of opportunity to embrace everything that is and welcome everything that is, to allow us to be all that we are, as we draw ourselves towards ourselves, to be that wholeness and that completion. Because this isn't the end of it. This is only this is nothing.
Yeah.
This little reality that we're experiencing here. And that's the beauty of it, is that we create reality. What people call from an individualistic perspective, they call reality as though it's something that's separate to them. But reality is just a creation. It's something that we've fabricated just by focusing our attention on a particular belief structure or a particular set of thoughts, is that we maintain it.
Yeah.
And that's one of the, talk about the 5 powers of Shiva from an Indian perspective, is the capacity to create, the capacity to hold something in place, maintain it, the capacity to destroy something, and the capacity to forget, and the capacity to remember. These are all the things, and when you see these, that's why I love Indian sort of symbology and stuff like that. We see all these little statues of people dancing with their arms and their legs, like Nataraj doing his dance. So each one of those arms and legs all represent a specific power, and they talk about that being the power of their god. And that's why I like the Hindu notions of gods, because they're not actually talking about there being an actual god there. What they're talking about is they're using this symbology to identify part of what you are, part of what you have the capacity to do. As the absolute, you have the capacity to forget, and all of those powers are manifest through you. You have the capacity to recall and remember and to bring it back together. You have the capacity to maintain something. A thought can travel across in front of you, and you can freeze it in place and maintain that, and then you can build stuff around it to create a whole reality that you can then enter into, to experience the world, so-called, from your own capacity, from your own creation. And in that, there are no victims, because a victim implies that something's happened to you, rather than something that you've actually done, you've created for your own ends, to teach you something or to have an experience. Say, I'm going to see what life's like if I'm like this. It's like this telephone here. It has the capacity to put apps on it. Yeah. Right. So, and you can download an app into your telephone and then play a game through that. Yeah. But if you view the body as being like a telephone, so-called, you can download an app into it, which is like a belief structure, and then you can see the world through the perspective of that app. So if I download the victim app into me, right, and I start thinking I'm a victim, then I'm going to start seeing the world from the perspective of a victim, because I've just downloaded it into myself, loaded it onto my operating platform, so to speak, and then everything that I see is from the perspective of a victim, and then that can then create, you know, like paranoia or anything else like that. It's all real experiences, but it's something that's part of what I've brought to be. And if I just delete that app, if I locate that app and then delete it, it's gone. And then I'm no longer able to see the world from that app perspective that I've just deleted, because it's been deleted from me. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And it can be anything.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be a victim. It can be anything.